Okay, ready to go? All right, so I'm going to call to order the Metropolitan Water District Representative Caucus meeting and the special meeting of the Board of Directors of West Basin Municipal Water District. And with that, Mr. General Manager, can we have a determination of authority?
Yes, Mr. President, let me read through roll call. Director Scott Houston, Director Don Deere. Here. Director Gloria Gray,
Here.
Director Harold Williams. Here. President Desi Alvarez.
Here.
Here. Here.
We hear you.
Okay, thank you.
We have a quorum.
Okay, so next item is, do we have any public comment?
President Alvarez, we have not received any requests for public comment prior to the meeting, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public who would like to make public comment, please indicate so now by raising your virtual hand or notifying us in person. President Alvarez, I do not see any requests for public comment.
All right, we'll go to the business of the meeting, discussion items. The first item up is the business model planning. And Mr. General Manager, please introduce that item.
Yes, thank you very much, President Alvarez. This item has been an item that we've been looking at having and hosting at our MWD Caucus meeting for some time. It is related to our business model planning. I believe that Mosa Mortada, the Chief of Staff of Metropolitan Water District, will be providing a presentation, though I'm not sure I see him online. Is he?
I am here.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you
I am
are.
here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I don't know how to turn my camera on. I apologize, but I'll figure that out as we go.
The floor is
Thank
yours.
you. Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Great to see you all. I can see you, but I don't know if you can see me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, giving Metropolitan the opportunity to give you an update about the business model process. So the business model update process reports into a task force that met on the 19th of August and approved a process for business model refinement. And that process includes holding 2 retreats with member agency managers to come up with proposals for business model refinement. So the first retreat is going to take place on the 9th and 10th of October. And, you know, this is a member agency led retreat, and Metropolitan is providing help with the facilitation and providing a facilitator, neutral facilitator to work on that. The objective of the first retreat is to come up with a scope of what that business model refinement looks like, and to start thinking about what refinement options are there. And based on that, have another retreat to do a SWOT analysis about what the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the Metropolitan business model are, and to come back to the task force with recommendations about refinement options. The process itself will take about 6 months, roughly. So we start in October and come back to the task force in March or April. But you know, the key thing to understand is the retreats are member agency retreats, and Metropolitan is participating in these as advisors, so the member agencies can coalesce and agree on what the next steps of the business model refinements look like. So to sum up the process is, so there'll be two main retreats and a few workshops in between, and come back to the task force with recommendations about what that looks like. So we have some ideas already that we're gonna seed this with, and today, EJ, you will receive an email from the facilitator. His name is Ken Kirby. He's sending out a description of the Metropolitan business model, what it entails, and then there's a survey that goes to all 26 member agencies about what their thoughts on the business model refinement is and what the next steps are. So when the survey results come back, we'll use that as a foundation for the facilitation of that workshop on the 10th and 11th of October. So I'll stop here and answer any questions you may have.
And Mr. President, I may add, the selection of Ken Kirby was a decision made by all of the Metropolitan Water District general managers. We did that along with the interim general manager, Devin Apadier, at a plan and strategic meeting where we had a chance to meet Mr. Kirby. Mr. Kirby has been a longtime facilitator and negotiator, has worked with a lot of different water interests throughout the state of California. But it's important to note that he had never worked for any individual Metropolitan Water District agency. So we felt that this was a great opportunity to bring in somewhat of an outsider with maybe no preconceived ideas or whatnot, very understanding of Metropolitan Water District. But also, I think what brought the group to the decision of selecting Mr. Kirby was just his methodology of really encouraging participation and really finding consensus amongst the participants. So I was excited to hear that. I think Mohsen mentioned that the workshop is the 9th and 10th of this month. I actually believe it's the 10th or 11th. I think it just
I think you're right.
Okay.
I apologize about the mistake. Yes.
No. I just wanted to make sure that I got it. But I think that this is an excellent opportunity to really bring the general managers in for an honest discussion of what has been discussed for some time. The discussion of the business model first came up at a Metropolitan Water District board retreat more than a year ago and had been talked about in general senses. But once I think that we started to get in and drill down to some of the issues, there are a lot of questions. And I know that I don't want to say frustrations, but I think it was trying to navigate where it is we're looking to go. And I, of course, know that the Metropolitan Water District Board of Directors is very engaged in this and looking for maybe some input from the general manager. So with that, I'll throw it over to the board. And I know our president, Desi Alvarez, has thoughts and has been very engaged in this process as well.
Thank you. First motion is, do you have any other comments or?
No other comments, Director Alvarez.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll just open it up for discussion. First, the board members. So any questions or ideas? And we'll start with you, Director Williams.
Yeah. Just kind of interesting. Did I hear that this person has not had any experience working with agency boards?
Agencies, yes, primarily up in Central Valley and Northern California, but had never worked as a facilitator for any one individual Metropolitan Water District agency, which there is some concern if you have somebody that's very familiar with West Basin and Central Basin and such, maybe they have kind of a preconceived idea as to what the needs of member agencies are and what Met should be providing. Or if somebody were to represent large portions of LA, they may have some thoughts. San Diego, of course, might have some thoughts. We're all very different. We all have very different needs, but that's part of looking at Metropolitan Water District as a collective and there to serve everyone. So having a facilitator from outside of the region, we felt that.
I don't know what to say because the longest time that I've been involved with these water agencies, that was, you wouldn't stand a chance of getting hired. So just wondering how.
Well,
what
sorry.
What is the someone who's kind of like an.
Well, he's definitely not an outsider. Mr. Kirby had previously worked with Lester Snow, who worked on significant statewide policies for the state water for the state of California. Very much knows kind of the needs of our state from top to bottom, but really just did not work with an individual member agency. So understand great deal of understanding about water in general, but maybe the individual member agencies, he'll work through that.
I think
And
that
Director
their
Williams,
intent was trying to bring in somebody that didn't have any relationship with any one or any one group of med agencies, understood med, have worked with med, but more of a Sacramento perspective and not any specific relation with any of the 19 member agencies. So it was bringing in not so much an outsider, but an independent party, meaning that that party did not have any ties with any member.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Director Deer, do you have any?
Interesting approach. You want to keep somebody that is neutral and not maybe biased towards any one or two particular agencies. And if they all agree, that's very good. Agencies agree.
Yeah. How about you, Director Hinckley?
I have no comments because I just walked in and missed it, so they'll inform me later.
You didn't miss much.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion, maybe you can go back and give a little bit of summary how we got here, because the business model discussion was originally brought up back in 23, I believe in February, and it's kind of been there and it never got any traction. So how did we get to where we are today? And maybe you might want to shed additional background besides the fact that, as you mentioned, it's been now taken over by the general manager.
okay, Director Alvarez, thank you. So the board had a retreat in February of 2023, and the discussion of the business model came up then. Given where we are, because we're looking at changes in water supply from water security perspective. We were then, I think, at 5% allocation on the state water project, and then our Colorado River allocation was not where it needed to be, and then our revenue started to struggle over the next year. So discussion was: is the business model viable, and does it need to be refined? But as Director Alvarez mentioned, that got off to a slow start because there was a lack of agreement amongst member agencies about what's broken, or if there is anything broken, and how to fix it. So as we proceeded with working on the climate adaptation master plan, it became even more evident that the supplies that we're getting from Colorado River and State Water Project are going to vary more, and also our conservation efforts that we're investing a lot of money in conservation. While it's working, we don't know how the immediate results of that and how sustainable are those. So we had a really bad year. We had budgeted to sell around 1.4 million acre feet, and we sold about 1.2, which caused us to dip into our reserves, and that was about $350 million loss of revenue in 1 year. So we realized that this is not a sustainable situation, and we need to look at the business model in a more sustainable way. The other thing that was at play was we have a lot of potential investment projects in infrastructure on the books as well. So we're looking at potentially pure water as a big project. There might be Delta tunnels, DCP, Delta conveyance. And, we have also sites reservoirs as a potential investment project in water resiliency. So all these, looking at our current business model, it will be difficult to afford building all this infrastructure with the current structure of rates. And so the initial discussion about the business model was related to volumetric versus, because about 90% of our rates, 85% of our revenue comes from volumetric rates. And we're looking at the balance of volumetric versus fixed costs. And then the other thing that was a focus area is looking at the water exchange program amongst member agencies to figure out how, if one agency has excess water, how to sell it to another member agency using the Met infrastructure. And the third item that drove the business model discussion forward was the treatment surcharge. In the preparation of the new budget process, some of the member agencies that use metropolitan treated water voiced concerns about the increase in the treatment surcharge, and they wanted us to examine that a little bit more closely, which we are doing currently on that business model. So that's where we are, and that's how we got to where we got today. And we started discussing updating the business model back in April, and that got off to a slow start because there was a misagreement or disagreement amongst member agencies how to proceed until August, when there was an agreement amongst all member agencies on a path forward, and that's where we are today. Director Alvarez, does that answer your question?
I think that gives it a nice summary of the background. In terms of the process moving forward, you mentioned obviously that there's going to be a kickoff meeting that's coming up in a week, and that will be coordinated by a facilitator. What is there a specific agenda that's going to get us to? You mentioned March, April. The business model will be concluded at least by this working group with recommendations. So, what is the agenda moving forward, starting with the facilitator session next week to get us to March, April?
So the specific agenda is the first retreat is going to focus on developing a charter for this task force of general managers, and to agree on a problem statement. If what is the current issue with the business model, and what is the scope of this assignment, and then there'll be 6 working sessions back held on monthly basis because of the time commitment required. And these working sessions will identify and examine specific problems with the current business model, not necessarily problems, opportunities as well, where we could do better, and drill into these, so to develop recommendations to come back to the board on what potential improvements could look like. And then after these 6 working sessions, there'll be another retreat to finalize the proposal that's going to come back to the task force and the board about what these recommendations for refinements will look like. So it will be busy back-to-back meetings of facilitated retreats and 6 working sessions in between.
Okay. I don't know if any comments from the board members, if you'd like to make any comments or any questions, feel free to ask.
No, thank you.
I did have a quick question, because I'm just trying to make sure I understood some history here. But the fact that Metropolitan over budgeted the water sales this last cycle, and I believe there was some dissension amongst the directors on that. Maybe President Alvarez can enlighten us, but I think a number of us have been concerned about how optimistic people are treating water sales, and it's not panning out, and we get ourselves in this boat. So I'd like to hear just some backstory on that real briefly, if that's okay. Maybe Director Alvarez, President Alvarez, but I just seem like that's an ongoing problem here.
I have some comments on that, but Motion, you might want to address
Sure,
that first.
certainly. And I see Katana online, she can jump in as well. But Director Houston, so the budgeted, the initial proposal in the budget of 2024 that we put forward was in line with previous years. So the last year was an anomaly in our sales. It was low because of a combination of supply availability and also demand. It's a combination of both. So when we did the budget this year, the finance team proposed a lower sales number than the initial one, and that was one of the compromises that was reached on the budget. So so it wasn't. I wouldn't say that. The projections were in line with previous years, so they weren't really out of whack from what we've achieved historically.
Okay, well, again, I understand that, and yet at the same time, even at West Basin, we've overprojected and it just wasn't coming to reality. And even with anomaly years, we tried to anticipate that. And so it is what it is. But as far as our perspective or West Basin's perspective, I think that some of us felt that Metropolitan has been overly ambitious. And I know different agencies might not feel that way. And that was part of probably the compromise. But for what it's worth, you know, that has impacted the business model. And we just can't count on the climate every year to be the same. So, you know, thank you for that,
good point.
Mohsen. But I just, you know, we went ultra conservative this last cycle at West Basin. And I think the Metropolitan needs to look at that too. And I know that not all agencies agree, but for what it's worth, I think that was our position this past budget cycle. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. Gaetano, anything you'd like to add?
I don't want to start a budget debate, Director Houston, but I do appreciate your comments. I think every budget is a debate of where we land with projections. I do think our team works really hard in water resources to project what our sales are going to look like. And we take a lot of work to analyze that internally. But budgets are projections. We sometimes hit and miss, and we sometimes don't. And I think since I've been here, we've been dropping that number. I think when I came to Met, we used to be at 1.85 million acre feet of water a year, and now we're 1.34. And thanks to this board, the board did really push to be conservative. I know that your agency wanted us to be at 1.24. We couldn't quite get there, but point well taken. We continue to see declines in sales, but we also have a different balancing, which is our expenditure side. So I hear what you're saying, and every year we are challenged, all of us. This is not a Metropolitan unique issue. I think it's regionally, we've all seen very similar revenue declines for a lot of reasons that you articulated earlier. So we will continue to work on that. And so the business model is really a different way of looking at what else can we do in big scale and looking at different components to support our revenues and to support our expenditures. And so that will be a different conversation, but I hear what you're saying about budgeting, and point well taken, and we'll continue to work hard to make sure we analyze and get to the right, hopefully right number, but budgets are estimates, as we know.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that, to both of your comments, Moshe and Gaetano, that yes, the current budget was finally an agreed upon budget. We did, at least this agency, as other agencies, actually supported a lower number more consistent with the sales from 23 and the 1.24 million. But 1.34 million was agreed upon. That's a big step from the 1.54 million that was in the previous budget that resulted in that $350 million deficit. But I think you've heard that from a lot of the board members at Met, and to reinforce Director Houston, we are very concerned that it is better to underestimate sales than overestimate sales, because if you underestimate your sales, you'll end up with a surplus, and that's a little easier to deal with to offset possibly other costs versus a $350 million type of deficit, which takes a big hit out of your reserves. So we'll see how this year goes, but so far it looks like water sales are going to come in a little bit lower than 1.34 million. We'll see.
Yeah, they are
So
still
far,
trending
we're on
lower.
pace to,
Yeah.
we're on pace to go a little bit lower than that, but we'll see.
Yes, we
Okay.
are tracking, we're tracking us slightly lower right now. We're gonna come to the board in November to present our Q1. So you'll see where we are. And just to reiterate, it is also a balancing act about the lower the number, the higher the rates are. So that's what people are balancing. So let's just remember that that was a give and take. But you're gonna get a full conversation in November, Director Alvarez.
Yes, but and the other thing that you just reminded me of, we do want to keep our rates low. We want to keep we want stability of rates. So we don't want to see fluctuations in the rates. We want to be able to say, this is the rates, it's going to be at this pace and not high variability in that. And that calls for consistency in revenues and expenditures so that they're balanced and that you're not having to make adjustments and then it impacts rates and harder to project future rate increases. Any other comments? I'd like to go back to the whole process. Motion, you talked about it, dealing with budget issues and looking at volumetric versus fixed revenues and balancing that, member transfer agreements and the treatment surcharges. Three of the key components that are going to be looked at by the task force. Can you speak a little bit more about some of the issues in the intermember transfer arrangements and what are some of the key things that people are looking at?
So it's still early stages. So if you remember, Director, on WRM presented a preliminary program to the board at Metropolitan of an exchange foundation of an exchange program. So the premise of it will be to make sure that if a single member agency has a excess supply, they could use the Metropolitan system to infrastructure to transfer water from one area to another. And there are some agencies that have groundwater availability and others don't. So I think some of them have different kind of resilience because of their storage or treatment capacity. And envisioning this longer term as well, the ones that are coastal agencies like Last Versionist, for example, they're looking at desal capabilities and they're looking at recycling wastewater. So their reliance on the Met system may change and their demand profile may change over time, which will make water available to other agencies. So figuring out how the Met system can be utilized to provide exchanges amongst member agencies would be would be beneficial to all agencies. And so that's the premise of it. It's still early stages in development and figuring out how that's going to look like. But WRM has been reviewing, has been coming up with ideas around that.
Okay. You also mentioned some big expenses that Met may be looking at, and these include whether it participates in the Delta conveyance construction, or whether it participates on site reservoir, and then what it does about its own pure water project. In total, that would be an awful lot of money. Delta probably $20 billion or so, the number that's been kicked around. Site reservoirs, another 3 or 4 billion. Pure water, depending on which version you build, is going to be $5 to $10 billion. It adds up to a little bit of change. When you look at all of those, you did not mention conservation, which is actually something that a lot of money can be invested in, but it'd be another potential source of water. Is that going to get a lot of consideration in this process?
Absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't mention it, but that's probably the first one on the list because that's the cheapest form of water, and I think all the projects that were mentioned we can't do them all because we're not going to need the water from all of them. I think it's going to be a process that the board will review and approve which projects move forward. But conservation is central to that. And if you remember, Director Alvarez, during the budget process, it came up repeatedly. How should we pay for conservation? And one of the most controversial issues was, do we borrow money to pay for conservation, or do we not? And I think the business model discussion is gonna discuss that for sure. It's gonna be a central point of discussion in the business model.
All right, I'm glad to hear that. I'm very glad to hear that conservation is going to be at the top of the list, because I think that at the end of the day, conservation has proven to be a very wise source of water to this state and carry the state of California for the last 30 years in terms of all of the growth that has occurred in the state. As this moves forward, one of the things that I would caution is that, and maybe it's going to occur, you can address it. Will there be stepwise information items brought to the board as to the direction that the business model is going? Because one of the things is that you end up bringing a finished product and the board is presented with that. A lot of times it's like, where does this come from? Who asked for this? This doesn't answer my questions, etc. So I think it would behoove everybody to have periodic updates and information to the board and make sure, and get some board feedback in the direction everything's headed.
Noted, and we were planning for it, but absolutely, I'll add that to the list of action items to make sure that the board gets periodic updates.
Well, I don't have any other questions. Any other questions from the board members? Do we have any questions from anybody in the public or from staff? Go ahead.
Hi, Mohsen. I have a question in terms of just the timing and the process. I think Director Albright's kind of talked to it about a little bit, but just West Basin and all the other member agencies have closely tracked the Camp for Water process, and I think we're happy to see that kind of finally moving forward and making some progress there, but it has, taken some time to get to this point. So what is Metropolitan staff going to do to kind of ensure that this process moves forward within the timeline, to have something to inform the board and to inform, frankly, the next, 2-year budget planning process? How are you going to go about to ensure that timeline stays, in place?
Thank you for the question. So you're absolutely right. I think it took us a while to find the footing, and with this process as well, because we've been talking about this for a little over a year, and now it's getting underway. And if you remember, the initial schedule was for us to come back with recommendations by November, and that was not welcomed by a lot of people. They were saying we want to take our time. So the discussion we had with the facilitator is we're gonna come back with refinement updates, proposals by March, April at the latest, no matter how that looks like. And he's gonna report directly back to include the updates that Director Alvarez mentioned in the board, the updates to the board. So the facilitator will hold us accountable to the process to make sure that we are producing what we committed to produce as far as refinement updates. So, and the board, of course, will guide that process. So that's the commitment that we got from member agency managers, as you know, and the facilitator.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Presentation.
Thank you.
Okay,
See you. Thank you.
so we will move on then to the next item, which is a presentation on the Sierra Forest Restoration Program. So, Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce that item, please?
Yes, thank you. And for this presentation, we have Nina Hawk, the Chief Bay Delta Resources Officer, as well as Jennifer Nevels, the Program Manager for Bay Delta Initiatives from Metropolitan Water District here. I'll toss it
Hi,
over to
good
them.
afternoon. I think that Nina's pulled into something else last minute, so I will introduce myself and introduce the item, but thank you for having us. So as you mentioned, I'm Jennifer Nevels. I'm a program manager in Metropolitan's Bay Delta Resources Office in Sacramento. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. So today I'm going to provide a short update on the Northern Sierra watershed agreements. Last month, Metropolitan's board authorized the general manager to enter into 3 watershed agreements in the Northern Sierra, one with the Upper Butte Creek 1 Forest Resilience Bond, LLC, the North Feather 1 Forest Resilience Bond, LLC, and the Plumas Community Protection 1 Forest Resilience Bond, LLC. Each agreement will be for a maximum of $200,000 for 2 years, or $400,000 total each. Funding will come from funds designated for this purpose in the approved Bay Delta budget. And the primary purposes of these agreements are to investigate and value the potential benefits of forest health projects in the upper watersheds, to build relationships in those watersheds, and to help advance the supporting science. As we all know, watersheds provide many valuable ecosystem services. So the goal here is to see if restoring or protecting those services provides benefits to Metropolitan, and if those benefits can then be quantified and valued. Some examples of potential benefits include water quality, water supply, fire risk reduction, carbon sequestration, and biodiversity and habitat. So really quickly, just a little bit of background on why we've been pursuing these agreements. So one major driver is climate change. So snowpack, especially in the Northern Sierra, is projected to decline due to rising temperatures. DWR studies project a 48 to 65% loss of snowpack by the end of the century. And because snowpack serves as California's largest reservoir, this would have a direct impact on water supply and aquatic ecosystems. In addition, projections show more precipitation falling as rain and falling earlier in the year. This also impacts water supply and aquatic ecosystems by shifting runoff into the winter months and away from the spring and summer. Actions to restore and protect watershed health could help lessen some of these impacts. Another big driver is wildfires. As we've seen this year, at the same time, climate change is bringing hotter and longer dry periods, modern day fire suppression policies and forest management practices have led to overly dense forests with very high fuel loads. The result has been wildfire regimes that are more extreme than in the past. This map of the Feather River watershed, the source of Metropolitan State Water Project supplies, shows areas above Lake Orville burned by some of the most recent mega fires. So over the last decade, major wildfires have burned more than 1.5 million acres in the Feather River watershed, which is more than 2/3 of the watershed area. So let's take a quick look at the 3 agreements and what sort of information we'd be looking to gain through these pilot investigations. So first, I'm going to walk through sort of a unique financing model. So the 3 agreements will be facilitated by Blue Forest. They are not a 501c3 nonprofit through a mechanism called a Forest Resilience Bond. So Forest Resilience Bond is a conservation finance model specifically designed to add new revenue streams to fund forest restoration. So I'll walk you really quickly through how that works. It's pretty interesting. So the process starts with an identified project or restoration need. In the case of those are large land scale projects identified by the U.S. Forest Service. Generally, these projects have NEPA ready to proceed, but don't have sufficient staffing or funding to implement them at a rate that can keep up with the frequency of fires and the pace of climate change. The Blue Forest works with the Forest Service to identify pieces that can be broken off and completed with the help of financing. So Blue Forest creates a forest resilience bond for each project. Each bond is incorporated as an independent LLC and subsidiary of Blue Forest. So you may have noticed each agreement is with a different Forest Resilience Bond LLC, and this is why. Next, Blue Forest partners with local communities, governments, and nonprofits to develop a finance plan and to facilitate the development of an implementation team to manage work on the ground. They also work to find potential beneficiaries of the project and help them to identify where there might be value to them in terms of those ecosystem services. So this is where Metropolitan and other bond financing partners that I'll show in the next slides fit into the picture. So we're essentially a beneficiary here. So once all of these pieces are in place, the bond is then brought to private investors, such as foundations and institutional asset managers who provide upfront capital to finance the project work. From there, we can follow the cash flow from the investors through the bond to the implementation partners, who in turn do the work on the ground, creating benefits that accrue to the different beneficiaries. And finally, funding from the beneficiaries is combined with other state and federal funding to repay the investors over time. The use of the Forest Resilience Bond financing model has been increasing with several projects completed, underway, and under development in California, Oregon, and Washington. And the very successful Yuba 1 and Yuba 2 forest resilience bonds are a great example of that. So the first agreement will be with the Upper Butte Creek 1 Forest Resilience Bond LLC. At full scale, the Upper Butte Creek Forest Health Project will cover 20,000 acres. And this bond will finance around $5 million to fund an initial portion of the full-scale project. Because Butte Creek supports the largest natural spawning wild population of spring run Chinook salmon in the Central Valley, this agreement provides an opportunity to investigate the potential benefits to aquatic species. Work planned includes treatments such as thinning, prescribed fire, and aspen and meadow restoration. So you can see some of the potential financing and local partners for this bond listed on the left-hand side of the slide. The next agreement will be with the North Feather 1 Forest Resilience Bond LLC. At full scale, the North Fork Forest Recovery Project covers 167,000 acres, and the North Feather 1 Forest Resilience Bond will finance up to $3.5 million of initial work in the Feather River above Lake Oroville. So this project will provide an opportunity to accelerate post-Dixie fire recovery and to look at the potential benefits to Metropolitan of projects focused on post-fire restoration. So forest health treatments are much the same as the others. And again, you can see sort of the partners listed on the side there, or potential partners at this point. And the final agreement will be with the Plumas Community Protection 1 Forest Resilience Bond LLC. At full scale, the Plumas Community Protection Project will cover 240,000 acres, also within the Feather River watershed above Lake Oroville. So this footprint and funding commitments are still being finalized. It's estimated this bond would finance activities to protect between 9 and 39,000 acres. So the unique focus of this agreement would be to look at the potential benefits to Metropolitan of protecting areas that haven't burned recently, so green areas essentially. So this slide summarizes the input received on this item from Metropolitan's board. We brought it as an information item in August and then the action in September. You know, broadly speaking, we heard that the board felt it was important to manage any risks associated with these investments, ensure project outcomes are achieved, and to be mindful of current and future budget implications as much as possible. Whoops. All right. So in terms of next steps, staff is working to finalize and execute the 3 agreements with that board input in mind, and we'll plan to return to future One Water and Stewardship Committee meetings with updates on project implementation and the results of those pilot investigations associated with these projects. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any from staff?
I do not have any. I don't know if anybody else.
None from members of the audience?
Mr. Chairman, I understand this project has critics. What do the critics say?
What are the critics? I haven't heard any critics per se. Well, I use that, yeah. Meaning that I think that it's an investment in probably good forest management practices. That is being made, and I think that overall it will improve water quality. My one comment has been that I think that the projects overall will be productive, and we'll see how they evolve. They're very much in conceptual stages, and I think that the funding level that Metropolitan is contributing is more or less just to get started. But with all of the improved management practices, which will enhance those forest area, I still have one question, and if you look at slide number 5, can you put slide number 5 up again, Jennifer?
Do it the hard way. This one?
So, yes, so what we're seeing is, and we've already been experiencing this, that the snowpack doesn't last as long. And so, and this is a kind of average historical hydrograph. And it shows, if you look at the solid line, that we get quite a bit of runoff from March to August. The changes that we're seeing and the changes predicted by all the climate models due to climate change is that hydrograph is going to shift to the left, and we're going to see earlier runoff. And so really, if you look at the portion of that hydrograph that is on the left side, and the difference between the dash lines and the solid line, the dash line being the new hydrology that we're going to be seeing, and the solid line being the old hydrology that everything's been based on. That area down there is really an additional amount of water that can flow through the system, and it begs the question, what are we going to do with that water? I think a lot of these projects are not going to effectively change that hydrograph. So that's one of the questions I have, although I do think that it will improve overall water quality by having better management practices, reduce the damage from forest fires, etc. All of that should be beneficial, but how are we going to be able to capture that water sooner? And how is that investment going to be made is something that I think will also need to be addressed. So just food for thought on that. That's my only comment on this.
I think that's a great. I think that's a great point, and I think sort of one of the things to be seen is if you have a more functional watershed, do you get enough sort of infiltration to help attenuate this big early season peak? So we're not going to build enough new storage to replace the loss of snowpack. I think, if you're familiar with Randall Newdeck, he talks about how you would need 8 sites reservoirs to sort of make up for that loss of snowpack. And we may get 1, we're not getting 8. So essentially you kind of start to look at green infrastructure, to manage water more naturally and hopefully reflect a more, hydrograph that sort of works better and into the summer and attenuates this problem that you're pointing out. So thank you.
Good question.
Go ahead, Director Houston.
I just want to make sure I understand in the overview, because it says 3 pilot investigations at a maximum of $200,000 each in fiscal years 24-25 and 25-26. So does that mean $200,000 per 24-25 and 25-26? Or does that mean $200,000 for each of these 3 projects in those 2 sets of fiscal years?
Yes, so it's $200,000 per project per fiscal year.
Okay. Which, so that's like, so $600,000 for 2 years in a row, right?
Total
Yeah.
of 600,000.
Which is a lot of money. I guess what I also don't understand, and you may or may not be able to answer that question right now, this is obviously people are deciding these things, but the 3 different projects are different sizes, there's different potential partners, they're not even all identified yet, right?
No, they are not. We're
Okay.
kind of leading the way here a little bit.
Gotcha. So, my my opinion would be, I don't know that you can justify funding each of these at an equal level for those 2 years. So I think that, you probably should look at what the percentage is on some of these. So it's just a feedback, but that's a lot of money up front to 3 different projects that are not equal in what they're going to accomplish. So again, I'm sure that the board will be making some decisions on this, but that's just my initial take. Thank you.
Yes, so the board did approve this last month, and I think, what we're really getting here is the information. So we're sort of paying equally for the information to potentially inform future investments or not. So not so much that we're, contributing to these projects as a percentage. Really, I mean, what we're contributing is sort of couch change in the total, that these projects cost. Most of it will be from other state and federal funds. But yeah, I appreciate the question. Thank you.
President Alvarez, we do have a
Somebody has
question.
their hand up.
Yes, it's Alex Heidi from Metropolitan Water District or Municipal Water Districts of Orange County.
Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you. And Jen, thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to, I think I agree with what Director Alvarez and Director Houston had both said. I think it will be really interesting when Metropolitan gets the kind of the quantification of benefits and that gets reported back to the board. I think it will be really interesting to see kind of what value Metropolitan gets. But I also wanted to highlight, because I think it's not said quite enough, that these are pretty innovative. In a lot of ways, Metropolitan is kind of forging a path here that may not just be for Metropolitan, but for a model for a lot of water agencies to look at in investments in upper watershed health. And I think it's really great to see you guys come up with a creative way to look at quantifying those benefits and figuring out a way to make investments in that upper watershed health. So I would just encourage you guys on opportunities in the future where you can be creative. I think this is a really innovative approach. And, we've seen a couple places where that's true. I noticed you guys also have an item on the agenda for this month on some state water project agreements for supplies north of the Delta. And that's also another really innovative approach. So, where you guys see the opportunity to be a little bit creative and innovative, I think Met has some really fantastic staff to take somewhat innovative approaches to address some of these challenges. So I just, I wanted to reemphasize that and, let you guys know that it's noticed by the member agencies that this is, a really unique way to address things. So appreciate it. Just wanted to reemphasize that.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, anything else? If nothing else, Jennifer, thank you for a very nice presentation. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me.
So we'll move on. Next item up is director's comments and future agenda items. Anyone have any comments or any requests for? Start with you, Director Houston.
I have no.
Director Deere,
No, none, thank you.
Director Williams,
No, thank you.
Director Gray. Okay. I don't have any, so we are adjourned. Thank you all.